Hey, this is Bill Varney from fishthatsurf.com and surffishtackle.com with your Friday, April 17th surf fishing report. So first of all, I just want everybody to know that I'm going to be out of town fishing in Arizona for big bass in the lakes out there, leaving tomorrow, coming back later next week. So I'm not sure if I'll have a report next week, certainly one the week after if I miss everybody next week. So a lot of the surf fishing this week was a bit slower, tampered down by this storm that came in over the weekend. A little bit of rain associated with it, a bit of wind associated with it. Not overly windy, but certainly wind associated. That knocked down surf fishing, slowed it down, of course, sent a lot of people home to watch TV and basketball games rather than going to the beach. So let's jump right into the conditions for this week. The water temperature in San Diego and Santa Barbara has been anywhere between 60 and 67 degrees. We saw the water temperature for a day or two drop a bit after that storm and after the wind, but it's certainly begun to pick up again, and we're going to see the temperatures in the water go up as this weather clears up, and we have a beautiful weekend and a beautiful week coming up, just coming up this week. So looking forward to that. And the other thing too is we'll continue to have south swells pushing that warm water north. And once again, I wouldn't be surprised if when we get into the first or second week of May that we may already be up to 70 degrees. We'll just have to keep our eye on that. Swell wise, the surf today and over the weekend is a building south swell, not a big south swell, but certainly building. That's going to be followed early next week by a northwest swell. So we're going to see surf about chest to maybe waist high or chest, waist to chest high, on south facing and west facing beaches over the next week or so. That will vary at the standout spots. It may be smaller in some areas, bigger in others, but not too big of a surf. And then the other really good news is that we have 3 at least south swells coming up from the South Pacific over the next 2 or 3 weeks now. We're going to have one build beginning next week later into next week. And that is a really great storm because it's coming off a cyclone that's off of Chile. And it's only about 200 or 300 miles off the coast of Chile. So its fetch is not perfect for surfing. For example, in Southern California, the swells will be somewhat mitigated in size because of that. But one good thing for fishing is that it's so close to shore that as those swells push up the coast through South America, Mexico into California, they will be pushing quite a bit of warm water because once again, it's in that shallower water and it's pushing it up the coast kind of like a broom. If you looked at the surf earlier this week at places like Huntington Beach, you could really tell these south swells because they're coming in at such an angle out of the south. You can really tell that that's the direction they're coming from, and that's a really good sign for surf fishing, really all fishing in general. So that's great. We'll look forward to that. And then tide-wise, we have some 6-foot tide swings coming up as we get near today's new moon, super high tide tonight. Of course, tonight is the beginning of the run of the grunion for the next 4 days. So over the next week, we're going to see some really good morning or really midday high tides and then evening high tides. I call those gentlemen high tides when they come in the middle of the day because you don't have to get up early to go fishing. So good tides coming up this next week, both a good portion of afternoon or noontime and evening high tides to fish. So that's great news. And then wind-wise over the next week, we're going to have that light offshore and that side shore. Now what will be different probably over the next 3 weeks is that we have what we call spring winds, which means that in the afternoon, often this time of year, we'll have 10 to 20 mile an hour winds out of the northwest. A little bit stronger than we will normally have. When we get into May, for example, we'll only have maybe those 10 to 12, 8 to 12 mile an hour winds in the afternoon on most days. So this is a windy period. This is typical with the spring winds. So keep your eye on that. A lot of good fishing in the morning. Might be a little bit too rough in some of the afternoons. You'll just have to look at the cams at the beach before you go down there. And then remember, tonight is the grunion run. Starts about 9:45, 10 o'clock. Usually like to get there maybe about 11, 10:30 or 11. So it gives them the scouts a chance to come in and then hopefully the bigger ones to come in. Remember, now through the 1st of July is a no-take period. So you don't need a license because you can't take any grunting at the beach. You can just observe them. And once again, really important to know where they staged offshore and where they came onshore. That's where there's going to be halibut, white sea bass, big barred surf perch, and even corbina feeding in those areas. So look for that. Try to get information on that. That'll help you out on your surf fishing. There's no question about that. So let's jump into the surf fishing report. Up in Santa Barbara, the water turned over with this wind. There is more kelp and so forth in the water than there was last week. But along the entire Santa Barbara stretch, from La Conchita all the way up to the Hollister Ranch, continues to be really good surf fishing for perch all the way to 14 inches up there, barred surf perch, and of course a variety of buttermouth and other types of perch that you'll find around rock structure. Calico surf perch, buttermouth surf perch, opali, those are all biting up in the Santa Barbara. Really Malibu all the way through the Santa Barbara area has been really good for those. The other news up there is, even though halibut fishing has slowed down up in that area in the last week, it probably had a lot to do with weather. That white sea bass fishing in that zone, really from the Mesa all the way up to UCSB Campus Point, has remained good for these sublegals. One angler using a white fluke hard bait, or excuse me, a white swim bait this week, caught a 25-inch white sea bass up there. So there's been quite a few fish. They look like they're getting a little bit bigger. I know probably staging outside of those are the real big ones. So look in that entire zone at the Mesa. This fish was caught at Hope Ranch, Moore Mesa, and then Goleta Beach. All along that whole zone, you're going to have a good shot at a white sea bass there. And really, they're going after anything that's kind of in that white color, and even spoons we've heard too. So look for them. That's a great area to fish, and certainly try to fish those tides where it's that low tide going up to a high tide. That's going to be your best time to stay out of the kelp and catch fish up there. So that's been really good. And then the other good news is at the very southern part of Santa Barbara County, or the northern part of Ventura at La Conchita Beach, it's been really good. Mussel shoals, been great for perch fishing along there. But the big news this week was really good corbina fishing along there. A lot of corbina seen in that area, with one angler fishing the fly, catching a nice 23-inch corbina up at La Conchita. So Santa Barbara fishing remains good. We'll really pick up this weekend and this week with these better conditions. And then as we make our way down to Ventura, not a lot of word out of Ventura this week. Once again, continues to be really good in the whole stretch there, Port Hueneme all the way up to Emma Woods for perch fishing along there, both walleye and barred surf perch. But the big news in Ventura continues to be the corbina. So many people are seeing corbina there. They're seeing them in Santa Barbara, but they're really seeing a lot down in the Ventura area. And once again, one fly angler this week went 2 for 2 on those 20-plus inch corbina out there, catching, releasing. The guy's an incredible angler. I think he's probably caught 15 in the last month or month and a half. So continues to be good corbina fishing up there. I know that'll continue and probably really turn on when these sand crabs come to the surface with their eggs. We're really looking forward to that. No report this week out of Malibu, but I know that Malibu zone's always going to be good for perch fishing, whether at Leo Carrillo or all the way up at Point Magoo or anywhere in between there. Good perch fishing along there. And then as we make our way down to the South Bay, once again slower this week in the South Bay. Lots of reports of those 8 to 12-inch barred surf perch, a smaller walleye surf perch in there. Anglers are using, market shrimp, lugworms, occasional bloodworms, mussel, clams. All of those things are working really, really well for the perch in there. A lot of corbina being seen down in Hermosa Beach. No catches that were reported to me this week. But a really good catch up in Santa Monica this week was a beautiful 6-pound spot fin croaker. And the angler fishing for that was using squid to catch that. Now, often I don't use squid, and the reason for that is that many times it attracts sharks or things I'm really not fishing for. But if you are to use squid, and it is effective, and certainly when it comes to spot fin croaker, I've caught them on everything from a grub to a sand crab, ghost shrimp, clams, mussels, lugworms, bloodworms, you name it. I've caught one on just about everything. So they're really foraging, they're looking for food. But if I'm fishing squid, this is what I do. I'm going to pull off or cut off the head of the squid. So I just have the body of the squid left. I'm going to cut it down one side and fold it open like a piece of paper. And then I'm going to take it and cut it long ways so that the strips of squid are about the width of a pencil. And then I'm going to hook one end of that several times on my line and leave a trailing edge behind it. By doing that and casting out and slowly retrieving that squid strip towards shore, it waggles its tail. It kind of looks like a squid swimming. It may look like a worm coming out of the bottom swimming, and has been very effective for me in the surf for years. If you just wad on a giant chunk, it's just floating around back and forth out there, and it looks like a chunk of dead squid that's on the bottom. That's something that's going to eat on the bottom, like a shark is going to look for. So change your presentation up by cutting them into a pencil size, putting them on your hook so it has a tail. You have much better luck with that squid. So that's what's going on in the South Bay. Not a lot of news this week out of there, but hopefully this upcoming week with these improving conditions, it'll get better down there too. It usually is really good in the spring, particularly down that Torrance Rat Beach area. And then as we move down to Orange County, not a lot of reports out of Orange County this week either because of the weather, but perch fishing in the whole stretch from Newport Beach all the way up to Seal Beach on those barred surf perch and walleye has remained really good around there. And really the biggest news coming out of Orange County this week was really good fishing on the South Bolsa-Chica area all the way down to the cliffs there by Golden West Street. There were, a handful of sub-legal halibut caught down in that area, and then another beautiful 5-pound spot fin croaker caught down there on a clam. So that area continues to be good, and once again, we're seeing more and more of these spot fin in the account, which means they're out now in their spawning mode, and they're really hungry and looking for something to eat. Besides that, in Orange County, it's been really pretty slow, and we hope that once again in the next week, when the wind and the rain is gone now and it becomes warm throughout the weekend, really should pick up next week. And then as we make our way down to San Diego, really from Del Mar to Torrey Pines, there's been a lot of barred surf perch, walleye surf perch. Anglers down there are using grubs, different lures like hard baits. They're using dried lugworms, live lugworms, ghost shrimp. All of those are working down in that area for perch. Down at Black's Beach this week, once again, we have another spot fin croaker down there, about a 4-pound, 18-inch spot fin croaker caught on a ghost shrimp down there. And then as we make our way down to Pacific Beach, there was a bunch of sublegal halibut caught right around the pier area. Nothing big yet, but once again, those are coming in and staging, waiting for these upcoming grunion that we're going to see tonight throughout the weekend. So I'm thinking into the weekend and into next week, we're going to have some really good surf fishing for halibut along the coast. They'll explode. Because remember a couple of weeks ago? Because remember, every couple of weeks we're going to have these grunion runs. Remember a couple of weeks ago when we had the 38-incher and the 42-incher, and a couple of weeks before that we had an 18-pounder and a 17-pounder. I think we'll probably see that again this week with these improved conditions. And then down to Mission Beach. Down in Mission Beach, we continue to have this good bite on, those like 8 to 12-inch barred surf perch down there. It's been particularly good down there. And, just about everything's working. A lot of anglers are using things like mussel, clams, the market shrimp, cut market shrimp is working well. All of those things are working well in the surf. So my tip for this week is, we're right on the edge of being in the heart of the surf fishing season. If you haven't done it already, get your gear out, go through your gear, make sure your reel is lubricated and all the sand's out of it, it's working fine. Clean off your rod, replace your line. Now's a really good time to replace your line for the summer. Go through and organize your tackle so you have what you need, and then take some time to tie leaders of different sizes, maybe a 10-inch leader, 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch leaders. I usually put them on a little piece of cardboard about this big, just wrap them around the cardboard. That way I have 4 or 5 of them. So when I go to the beach and I'm fishing and I get a knot or my line breaks or I have to cut my hook off, instead of taking time tying a knot on the beach under that low light when the fish are biting, you can just pull this right out of your pocket, unwrap one of those leaders, clip it on, put on a bait, cast it out, and you're ready to go. So that's this week's surf fishing report. And until next week, whether I'm here or not, I'll see you on the beach.